Hello and welcome to Focus on Africa. I'm Zuhura Yunus. Our top stories. Underwater and out of time, we report on the worst floods to hit South Sudan in decades and ask if next week's COP26 climate summit will be enough to save the continent from environmental catastrophe. Somalia's president and prime minister reportedly agreed to end a bitter rift, paving the way for the country's long-delayed elections. As Africa's biggest film festival draws to a close, we'll find out why Burkinabés are the buffest film buffs of them all.
It's in our blood. If we don't show anything for 2 or 3 weeks, people start complaining on the radio. I think they see themselves in these films. It makes them dream.
Also in the program, All the Sport with Peter. And Namibia create history at cricket's T20 World Cup by beating Ireland and reaching the Super 12s. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. We're just over a week away until the start of one of the biggest ever world meetings on how to tackle climate change, the COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow, here in the UK. Many are pinning their hopes that this conference will galvanize world leaders to act fast and bring us back from a climate abyss which many African countries are already tumbling down. Take South Sudan, for example. The UN says more than 700,000 people there have been displaced by the worst floods in decades. The BBC's Gunza reports.
From above, a glimpse of the destruction caused by weeks of unrelenting rain. Houses submerged, livestock swept away, and farmlands completely destroyed by flash floods. Those who have survived have fled to higher grounds, but with roads and bridges destroyed, it's been difficult to get them much needed assistance of food and shelter.
Our request to the government and organizations is that they should provide us with some plastic sheets, because if the water does not enter our shelter, we could still make small channels around our homes. But if the rain continues, there is a need for plastic sheets to cover us. Our main fear is for the children falling sick because of the cold caused by the rainwater, having nothing to cover them.
This small village in the west of the country is now abandoned, save for a few determined to salvage whatever they can.
We've seen houses submerged, people wading through water, and infrastructure damaged. The floods are a reality. This is the 21st century, and we have spoken to people who've said they have not seen flooding like this since 1962.
South Sudan is the world's youngest nation and also one of the poorest. Many people here depend on food aid to survive. But even health facilities like this one are said to have been looted by armed militias, further worsening the situation.
They have all collected the drugs and they have stolen the drugs. And they destroy everything in hospital. Microscope, they have all destroyed. HIV drugs, we were dying, nothing like drugs. Where are we going to get the drugs? The child can suffer from malaria. There is no anti-malaria.
Scientists blame climate change for the extreme weather patterns seen not just in South Sudan, but across the region. They say that if nothing is done, scenes like this will become all too familiar, endangering the lives of those most vulnerable.
Climate change does not have to lead to despair, because there are solutions. Solutions include pumping, they include canalization, and they include good planning. What we would like to do as an international community, and what we must do, is support the efforts of the people and the government of South Sudan.
But there are concerns that if disasters like this persist, inter-ethnic conflicts could erupt yet again as people fight over resources just to survive, threatening the fragile peace agreement in the country. Emmanuel Gunza, BBC News.
Just how much meaningful change could there be at summit which won't be attended in person by the heads of state of China, Saudi Arabia and Russia? These are some of the countries whose climate policies are doing the most to put all of us at risk. So with a week to go, should we really be optimistic? And are we ignoring the voices of young climate activists? The BBC's Pierre-Antoine Denis put these questions to Abdullah Shahid, President of the United Nations General Assembly.
This is the first COP taking place after the US coming back into the main fold of the Paris Agreement. Expectations are high. During the high-level week at the UN General Assembly, the statements were promising. So there is hope, and the presidency that I'm trying to rein in is a presidency of hope. So I always am optimistic.
Of course, island nations are very close to your heart. There are many island nations in Africa, and there seems disproportionate consequences regarding what island nations are causing.
The Maldives, where I come from, we started talking about climate change and sea level rise way back in the 1980s. And in those days, it was not a fashionable thing. It was not as widely spoken as it is today. The small island states who are in the front line of this climate disaster, for us, it's an existential threat. The impact is enormous, and we can't survive on our own. It has to be a collective decision. Africa needs assistance as much as any other part of the world, and Africa, to survive, they need the scientific, modern, green technologies at behind.
There seems to be a clear difference with, on one hand, young activists, and you seem to side by them. They have a voice, they're making themselves heard. But on the other hand, with governments saying they're listening to them, but they aren't really acting at the moment. Do you think that that's fair?
Why I have hope that humanity will ultimately make the right decision. Why I have hope in the goodness of humanity is because of the young people. 1.8 billion young people around the world today. This is the largest youth population that humanity has ever seen. And this planet is going to be inherited by them. When I hear them, when I hear their voices, when I hear their stand on climate action, I'm encouraged. I side with them because they are on the right path.
They always tell us that it actually has a mental trauma on them. Do we have to sacrifice a generation to make sure that our planet survives?
We cannot let a generation be sacrificed. We have to save them, we have to save the planet, we have to save the youth, and by saving the youth, we save the planet, we save humanity. So there is no choice but to take the right decisions at the right time.
Well, you heard there the President of the United Nations General Assembly saying that listening to young activists is key to fixing this global problem. So let's do just that. I'm joined now by Raisa Noor Mohammed, a 19-year-old climate activist studying at the University of Cape Town. They'll be attending COP26 in person, having crowd-funded flights and hotels just to be there. Raisa, welcome to Focus on Africa. What are your highest priorities in terms of what can be done to tackle climate change, which you're hoping will be addressed at the summit?
Thank you so much. For me, my focus as an intersectional activist is obviously intersectionality, because I believe that nothing can be viewed in isolation. No issues can be viewed in isolation. And when it comes to the climate crisis specifically, I feel like world leaders, specifically the West, don't acknowledge enough that you can't tackle the climate crisis by only looking at climate, because there's so many other things related to it. And they don't do enough to acknowledge that the climate crisis is very much a product of colonization.
So Raisa, what do you want them to do?
I want them, well, honestly, the summit itself is very exclusionary. So what ideally they should be doing is being more grassroots. They should be more inclusive. They should, instead of spending so much money gathering in Glasgow with only world leaders, they should be putting effort into actually going and involving marginalized people, because these summits are, again, so exclusionary, both like financially, physically, in terms of the terminology used. And what they should be doing is tackling this from a grassroots level and actually consulting marginalized people.
So Raisa, you personally are going there. Don't you think you're part of it as well?
Well, what alternative is there? If I don't go, if young people don't go, then we're literally just leaving them as like this tiny group of Western world leaders to make decisions themselves. What choice do we have? Because if I don't go, if I say, yeah, and you know what, I'm boycotting COP, no one's gonna care. No one cares if I'm not there. So young people, especially young people from the global South, I feel like it's important for us to be there because, one, there's not any other chance for us to meet like that. There's no other chance for so many young activists from all around the world to be in one place. And two, if we decide to ignore them, they're still going to meet. And what will happen is they just will be making these exclusive decisions in peace.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's Raisa Noor Mohammed, a 19-year-old climate activist studying at the University of Cape Town. Somali President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo and Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble have agreed to end a bitter rift that had threatened to derail the country's long-delayed elections. The row between the two leaders was sparked by the government's handling of the disappearance in June of a female spy, Ikran Farah, leading to the appointment of parallel intelligence chiefs and security ministers. Farmajo and Roble held their first face-to-face meeting in several weeks in Mogadishu yesterday. Joining me now is Bidan Dahir from the Somali service. Bidan, what triggered the rift at the first place between the president and the prime minister?
Thanks, Sur. I think you already mentioned it. It's the disappearing of the spy lady Ikran Farah Tahlil, and that really created more problems for the Somali government because her family accused that she was hijacked and killed by members of the NISA. And the Somali government investigation concluded that Al-Shabaab actually killed her, but Al-Shabaab dismissed that, and also many Somali actors dismissed that. So when we have that, that's the government credibility was really tarnished with this spy case. And then the Prime Minister suspended the spy master of Somalia, Fahad Yassin, who is very close to the president, and then president appointed another one. And then we have these parallel appointments and parallel decrees from the Prime Minister and the President.
So has the situation been resolved now?
According to an agreement last night, the President and Prime Minister, they agreed to work together now, and they issue 6 points agreement. But let's hope how that will work out.
Do we know whether the parliamentary and presidential election will happen? Do we have any dates?
I think there's a positive movement because last month there was some selections of the upper house members, and there was almost done, and now they are moving to the lower house. So I think there's some movements, and if these agreements goes through with the president and prime minister, I think the elections will go through, and if everything goes well, and you know Somali politics can change immediately.
Thank you very much, my colleague Bidan Dahir from the Somali service. Still to come, that's a wrap.
Joel Kuyungi, BBC News, Ouagadougou.
We'll bring you a front row seat at Africa's biggest film festival as it draws to a close in Ouagadougou. Welcome back. Africa's biggest film festival is coming to a close this weekend. The festival, popularly known as FESPACO, is held in Burkina Faso every 2 years. The event is a time to shine for the country, but outside of the glitz and glamour of the festival, how is the film industry faring there? Joel Kuyungi reports from the capital, Ouagadougou.
Ouagadougou is home to a vibrant cinema culture, one that is praised for its talents and one that has been the cultural lifeblood of the country for many years. Aminata Diallo-Glaise, better known by her stage name Karijoli, tells us what it was like in the golden age of Burkinabe cinema at a decommissioned outdoor theatre.
There is 20 years, people come a lot, and they can show the movie from un peu d'argent, comment tu dis?
Very little money.
Yeah, very little money.
Yes.
On a l'expertise.
We have the expertise of our comedians as well as technicians who we export very well. I think in that regard, we are doing good. After all, we are the African capital of cinema.
On est quand même la capitale du cinéma africain.
We're in the oldest and largest cinema hall in Francophone West Africa. Every week, about 2,000 people fill the seats to watch the latest Burkinabe productions.
It's in our blood. If we don't show anything for 2 or 3 weeks, people start complaining on the radio. What's going on? Why aren't there any Burkinabe films? I think they see themselves in these films. It makes them dream.
Still, Burkina Faso's film industry faces a myriad of challenges.
It's difficult to be in an industry where we put a lot of money into film and we can't properly capitalize, not because the film lacks in quality, but because there's a lack of adequate infrastructure to properly monetize the film.
Despite the challenges, the reputation of Burkinabe's film industry travels beyond its borders and attracts young talent from neighboring countries. Banu Sagou is an aspiring Malian filmmaker who has been training at a renowned cinema school here in Ouagadougou.
We already do cinema and we learn TV. That's the advantage of being at this film institute. So when you graduate, if cinema doesn't work out or you don't have enough money to make your films, at least you can approach a TV station to offer your services, even for a series, so that ultimately you can have money to produce your own films.
A new UNESCO report shows that the African film industry has the potential to create over 20 million jobs. However, it remains largely untapped. For Burkina Faso to do its part, the consensus among everyone we spoke with is that the government needs to step up its participation.
We really need to have the political will.
A lot of political will.
We need a lot of funding. The authorities need to believe in us.
And with that support, the film industry in this country will no doubt go from strength to strength. Jo Kuyungi, BBC News, Ouagadougou.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports with Pete. What's up?
Many thanks. A lot of stuff up today. Eliud Kipchoge and Joshua Cheptegei are amongst the names in the running for the World Athletics Male Athlete of the Year. Both runners are on a 10-man shortlist. Kipchoge, of course, is the 2016 and 2020 Olympic marathon champion. He's also the world record holder with a time of 2 hours, 1 minute and 39 seconds and has been described as the greatest marathoner of the modern era, while Cheptegei is the Olympic gold medalist in the 5,000 meters and, of course, world champion in the 10,000 meters. In the women's category, Kenya's Faith Kipyegon is the only African on the list after a sensational year saw her become the Olympic and Diamond League champion in the 1,500 meters. She's joined by Jamaica's triple Tokyo 2020 gold medalist Elaine Thompson-Herah and the European Female Athlete of the Year, Sifan Hassan of the Netherlands. Meanwhile, athletes in Kenya have been paying their last respects to their colleague Agnes Tirop, who was murdered last week in her home in Iten, Western Kenya. The late Kenyan athlete will be laid to rest tomorrow. Today, a host of the country's leading athletes turned out for a peaceful procession in honor of the world record holder and 2 World Championship medalists. BBC Sport Africa's Michelle Katami was also in attendance.
Over 300 people joined the likes of Faith Kipyegon, Joycelyn Chepkosgei, Eunice Sum, Joanne Jelimo and Mary Keitani among others in the march behind a banner reading "End Gender-Based Violence" as Tirop's body was escorted from Eldoret Hospital to her home in the nearby town. Today's events comes 9 days after the 25-year-old was found stabbed to death at her home in Iten earlier this month, with her husband currently in jail as the police continue to talk to their suspects. On Monday, a magistrate allowed police to hold Ibrahim Rotich, arrested in Mombasa while trying to flee the country, according to police, for 20 days, during which he will be assessed to see if he is mentally fit to stand trial. Trop's murder has sparked several other Kenyan athletes to talk about domestic issues.
Today's demonstration, at least, we showed the world that we have to end this violence.
It's unfortunate that Agnes was just a procession because of her death, and it's painful. It was really.
Julius Yego there ending that report. Now, Namibia have created history at cricket's T20 World Cup after they beat Ireland by 8 wickets. Namibia captain Gerhard Erasmus hit 53 not out from 49 balls, and David Weiser an unbeaten 28 from 14 to seal victory with 9 balls to spare. It's the first time Namibia, the lowest ranked side in the World Cup, have reached the main draw, and the first time they've beaten a test-playing nation. In finishing as runners-up in Group B, they will now join India, Pakistan, New Zealand and Scotland in Group 1 of the Super 12s. On to cycling now, and Africa's only professional outfit, Team Quebecer, face a race against time to find new sponsors. They missed an October deadline to find enough sponsorship money to be able to apply for world status. That's led the team's principal, Doug Ryder, to allow his riders look for new teams for 2022. He's been speaking to the BBC.
It's absolutely possible. That is absolutely possible that we would fold, and that would be an end of an incredible journey. The charity wouldn't fold. Quebecer would continue because it's run incredibly well. But I mean, of course, this team and its aspiration and its hope and its messaging and its globalness and its engagement with fans around the world and the funding that it raises would be lost, which would be significant. It would hugely affect communities across South Africa and into Africa. It would also affect Africa's development in the sport of cycling, because there wouldn't be this aspirational team that has created such hope and opportunity for so many. And if you think that the World Championships will be, the World Road Racing Championships will be in Rwanda in 2025 for the first time for the African continent. And our team has been such an enabler in getting Africa's visibility in cycling for that to happen. I mean, it would just be an incredibly sad day should that happen.
The Premier League returns this weekend. Well, actually, there is a game tonight between Arsenal and Aston Villa. Ahead of that game, Arsenal boss Mikel Arteta took time to talk about the abuse ex-Newcastle manager Steve Bruce received at the hands of the club's fans, describing it as unacceptable. Arteta says managers are being put off taking jobs because of that sort of treatment. Meanwhile, Newcastle, who travelled to Crystal Palace on Saturday, are said to be in talks with former Roma manager Paulo Fonseca as they continued their search for Bruce's replacement. Fonseca was in charge of Roma for 2 seasons between 2019 and 2021, leading the club to 5th place in Serie A in his first season and then the Europa League semi-finals last term before being replaced by Jose Mourinho in the summer. If he does get the job, he'll be the Premier League's 3rd African-born manager after Patrick Vieira and Nuno, having grown up in Mozambique. In other games, Chelsea are at home to bottom of the table Norwich. Everton host Watford, while champions Manchester City travel to Brighton and Hove Albion. Meanwhile, the game of the weekend must be Sunday's clash between Manchester United and arch-rivals Liverpool. Now, here's something that could be a great listen for you this weekend. South Africa's first black rugby union captain, Siya Kolisi, has told the BBC he wants the extreme hunger and violence he suffered as a boy and his later battles against racism and alcoholism to act as an inspiration to others from a similar background. He was talking as part of a wide-ranging interview on a new BBC Sports Desk podcast, which you can find online. I highly recommend it. You should listen to it this weekend as well. I will try my best, Peter. Trust me on that one. Feel free to get in touch with me and some of the team on social media. I'm at Venus Nyota. Well, that's all for the program. From me, Zuhura Yunus, and the rest of the Focus on Africa team, have a lovely weekend and goodbye.